And now, our keynote speaker, Teresa Younger, President and CEO of the Ms. Foundation for Women. Ms. Younger has led the Ms. Foundation since 2014, and in that role, she has been on the front lines of some of the most important battles for women's health, safety, and economic justice. During her tenure at the Ms. Foundation, the organization has launched groundbreaking initiatives to call out and address key issues such as pathways to opportunity for low-income women and girls. She previously served as the executive director of the Connecticut General Assembly's Permanent Commission on the Status of Women and as executive director for the ACLU of Connecticut. Of course, all the details are in your packet. After she delivers her address, we're going to be inviting distinguished lecturer and director James Krauskopf here from the Center for Nonprofit Strategy and Management at Baruch to sit with Ms. Younger and at the panel table and moderate audience questions. So please, throughout the presentation, think about your questions. And now I'd like to invite Ms. Teresa Younger to the podium.
Well, good morning, almost afternoon. You stayed, you made it to this point in the program. I'm not going to say anything, so you can all go home now. I have to tell you, I've had an amazing morning. I've heard lots of great ideas and lots of data. My head is actually spinning, and it's spinning on for a number of reasons. Amongst them is we just continued a strategic plan, which now I'll call a framework, which started getting shifted 2 minutes after the board approved it. I had a conversation yesterday with some of my board members about some of the up-and-coming challenges, and so listening to board governance conversations and what the leadership development of my board is going to look like had my head spinning. And I just finished a conversation with my VP of Finance and Administration where we were talking about forecasting. So that was kind of a little bit about where I am. And so when I was listening to the presenters this morning, I'm just going to show you, because I'm a very visual person. These were my speaking notes before. They were clean. And these are my speaking notes now. So I have changed a few things around. I want to thank Claire and the Better Business Bureau and the Education and Research Foundation for having me here today. I want to thank Rana because I'm a board member of New York Philanthropy, and I know that somehow that's how I got this invitation to be with you all today. And I'm going to speak probably way too long, and I hope you ask lots of questions, and we'll go from there. I'm not sure I have anything new, revealing, or overly exciting to say to you, given the kinds of speakers that we had today. But I want to fill you in on a little secret and then take you through a video and talk with you a little bit about how we are handling these turbulent times. Does anybody here watch Naked and Afraid? Thank you. Okay, one person. All right, so the reason I asked it is I have a binge watching problem. I don't watch TV typically, except on the weekends, and then I binge watch this TV show called Naked and Afraid. It's the story of one man and one woman who go into the wilderness. They are naked and afraid, and they must survive 21 days. That's basically how the show starts out. And so two people that have never met each other meet naked in the wilderness, usually in an island or something like that, and or Texas. I also met there. And they meet up. They can bring one item with them, and they get a map. And they have to survive. And when I think about that TV show, I think about the times we are in. Now, I'm not asking anybody to get undressed, but it is a little bit, they know what they are getting into. They know that by going on this show, they are going to be asked to get undressed, walk into the wilderness, and survive 21 days. When we go into philanthropy and predominantly into the nonprofit sector, we go in knowing that we're going to try to save the world, that we're going to work harder than we've ever worked, that we're going to bang our heads on a few things along the way, and we go in wide open. And we just continue to hope that it's all going to be rainbows and sunshines at the end of it. And like on Naked and Afraid, there usually is a thunderstorm that starts right 2 days into the process. It wets all of the wood so you can't actually start a fire and keep yourself warm. And about 4 days into it, they also realize there's no food. And I think of these turbulent times a little bit like that. I went into nonprofit management to save the world. It was the easiest thing I could do. I was going to work really hard to get it accomplished, and there was always going to be dry wood somewhere that if I just lit the fire and talked to the right donor, it was going to ignite a flame and I would have all the money I ever needed. Well, how often has that happened to any of us? It happens, but it doesn't happen quite as often as we think it should. And so the disruptors that we see in the work that we do often come at us from a variety of different places. Some we think we're going into and we think we understand, and most, we don't understand. Most are unpredictable, and most are a surprise to us, or at least a surprise to me. I know it doesn't look like it, but I've spent over 25 years in the nonprofit sector. And when I got to the Ms. Foundation for Women, I thought I knew what I was going to be doing. I've spent about 3.5 years now in that space, working at the Ms. Foundation. But I could have never written the script for the world we're in today. Even if I had tried to write the script, it would not look like this. It has been filled with what I would call amazing challenges and some headbanging as we've moved forward. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the Ms. Foundation, I want to give you 1 second about that, and then I'm going to walk us through a video that I think expresses and explains how we at the Foundation have fostered disruption and what we are doing moving forward. First off, you should know that the Ms. Foundation is a public charity, an activist foundation, and we barely back away from anything. It is, as most of you may be aware, Gloria Steinem's foundation. It's the one that she started 44 years ago. She started it under the impression that if you just had enough money, you could fund the grassroots to do what they needed to do. And 44 years later, as the first public foundation, women's foundation in the country, we are doing just that. We are funding grassroots organizations across the United States who are working to get the work done. We wholeheartedly trust women. That in and of itself is a disruption. Just think about that. It's true. The fact that a society that is based in patriarchy is actually trusting women to make the decisions to help and heal their communities is causing some disruption. And we've seen it quite blatantly in the past year if you think just for a moment around the Women's March. Think just for a moment around the young voices that have been standing up for Black Lives Matter, and the young voices that have been standing up even most recently around Parkland. Those efforts have all been led by women. Women who are moving forward and pushing forward in the work that they did. And that is causing a large disruption in what is going on in our society. People are constantly being challenged about, is that the right way to do it? Should we be funding that way? And what does it need to look like? And we know that the most nonprofits in this country are actually headed by women. This means we also are going to be seeing additional challenges as we move along. At the Ms. Foundation, we are about challenging what's going on. We're about asking questions, and we are about making people feel just a little bit uncomfortable. In this new strategic framework that we have just put out, we are being bold and intentional about centering women and girls of color. This is not an exclusion. This is actually an inclusive action to ensure that those who are least seen get the supports that they need. And we're going to be driving philanthropy in that space. And we're doing that in everything we do. It's not that we're perfect, it's that we're intentional. And with that, I want you to watch this next video. In this video, we've taken some intentional steps to talk about our work. Watch it. I'm going to ask you a question. There will be a quiz.
Feminism is the social,
economic,
and political
equality
of all genders.
Resist, insist, persist, and enlist.
To just simply say me too is powerful, but it's soft.
Go back.
We won't go back.
We won't go back.
We won't go back.
We won't go back. We won't stop. We're here to stay.
We won't go back.
We won't go back.
We won't go back.
We won't go back.
We won't go back. We won't go back.
We won't go back.
We won't go back.
We won't go back.
No hay marcha atrás.
So let me just ask, how many of you got a headache because everything was coming at you so fast? How many millennials in the room, Gen Xers in the room, thought that was just the right pace? What was the first thing that jumped out at you? Anybody? Just feminism, inspiring. Women. Color.
How much has happened in the past year?
How much has happened in the past year?
How many women came out?
How many women came out?
How many women are winning elections?
How many women are winning elections?
Social change.
Social change. How many of you, when you woke up this morning and you listened to NPR, went, oh my gosh? And then how many of you just saw that and were reminded that the year was not so bad? Yeah. My colleague says, 2017 was the dumpster fire. I call it other things. She calls it a dumpster fire. And when we talk about turbulent times, when we talk about what needs to happen, one of the things that we have done, and one of the things that I continue to do, is to be very intentional about what we are doing. So if at the Ms. Foundation, I believe that we need to center and trust women, then it means that I am going to step forward into that space. So our board is 95% women, which would not be unusual, but we do have men on the board. My staff is 75% women of color. Our grantee partners are 75% women of color. We are very specific and intentional about how we trust them to do their work and give them general operating support. We ask the question constantly, who is missing from the table? And what is being triggered when we are asking that question? So this video actually showed 3 campaigns that we did. When I started at the Ms. Foundation, we needed to learn what people were thinking, and we were told that people didn't understand what feminism was about. And I heard story after story after story that feminism was something that people did not want to identify with. Her typing in the word feminism was actually a reflection that last year feminism was the #1 word by Merriam-Webster researched word on the web. Feminism. 3 years ago, nobody wanted to talk about it. We Won't Go Back was a campaign. The woman who was the black woman who was holding the sashes, the purple sashes at the end, that was actually a campaign that we were going to be doing right after the election last year. That was about a young girl walking in and seeing herself as president. We pivoted within 24 hours and came out with We Won't Go Back. The work that we do is about lifting up and amplifying the voices of those women whose voices constantly are marginalized. Every person that spoke in the video was actually one of our grantee partners. The voices at the end, We Won't Go Back. And this campaign, the one that this video kicked off, Our Voices, Our Time, is to push back against these turbulent times. This is not the first time that we are seeing challenges in the political, financial, economic arena, that we are seeing challenges in this space. But what we do know is when women's voices are brought to the table, we see change happen. And we see it continuously in everything that we have been doing. The intention of the Ms. Foundation is to trust women. It is to challenge us to go one step further. It is to ask us, where do we sit in these times? Turbulence right now is about uncomfortableness. It is about changing and challenging. It is about what is coming at us and how we want to pivot forward and move forward in these times. Now, we can do it in a number of ways. One of the things that we have done at the foundation and some of the work that we are attempting to do is about putting all of it in front of us, making sure that our vision and values and our mission are all clear. And we heard a lot about values and vision today, but that's where you have to go back to if you ask me. So mission, very clear, to build women's collective power in the United States to advance equality and justice for all. We do this by investing in and strengthening the capacity of women-led movements to advance meaningful social and economic change in women's lives. Our vision is one that I think is also very clear. It's painted on the wall, and I think it is what helps us move through these times. It helps us to go back and ask ourselves, are we doing this, and are we getting there? We believe in a safe and just world where power and possibility are not limited by race, gender, class, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, or age. We believe that equity and inclusion are the cornerstones of a true democracy in which worth and dignity of every person are valued. When we are struck with a time like now, when we see things like Parkland happening, we ask ourselves, are we part of a safe and just world? Where is our voice showing up? How are we challenging what needs to happen? How are we positioning those voices in our leadership? When we ask ourselves and we see instances of sexual harassment at the rates they have been, we ask ourselves, how is this truly building for an equitable and inclusive world? Where are these cornerstones in democracy, and where are women's voices going to be and need to be held? These are constantly what we are doing, and we are pushing forward in those spaces. We're doing it in the most challenging of ways and some of the most challenging of perspectives. What I say when people ask me, how do you handle these times? I don't sleep enough. I don't eat enough. I drink really good red wine. And at the end of the day, what I do is I know that there will be another day. This work that we do is difficult and challenging. We cannot control what's happening on 1600, we can't control what's happening in Capitol buildings, and we can't control, oftentimes, what's even happening in our own organizations. But what we can control, what we do need to do, is we need to remember that we are living this moment, a moment that nobody else gets to live except for us. We have to live through our values. Our values, whatever they may happen to be, need to be central to the work that we are doing. We need to have disruptors. We need to be disruptors in order for social change to take place. If we do not do that, we are not building a better world. Change does not happen when you are sitting in a comfortable seat. At the Ms. Foundation, our values are quite clear. We have 4 values: interconnectedness, trust and respect, integrity, and social justice. These override everything that we do. We constantly talk about them, we position the work that we do around them, and we push forward in the work that we're trying to do. Our board holds those same values. They did so, they agreed to them in our strategic planning process, and they continue to ask themselves the questions about what we need to do and how we move it forward. I'm an optimist. I actually get a little bit excited about these times. I actually enjoy a little bit of a challenge, but even I have found myself taken a little bit back on trying to figure out what's going on. So I'll tell you, hopefully nobody will be offended. I'm this person who has stickers all over the place in my house and in my home. They kind of remind me what I need to do. So I have one, and it has become kind of symbolic to what I'm doing and what I'm trying to do. But it says, be the kind of woman that when your feet hit the ground in the morning, the devil says, oh shit, she's up. That is how I move forward in these turbulent times. That is how I challenge what we have going on. I assume everybody is the devil. Not everybody. I assume some people are the devil, and I push forward in that work that we're trying to do. Amongst the things that I would recommend is to always take risk. Don't just rest on the laurels of tradition. What we have been doing is not what we need to do. And we heard from the young women that have spoken today, and many of the people that have spoken today, that the way it was is not the way it's going to be. It's going to be a challenge. So, reassess your board matrix. Who are you looking for and what are you looking for? When was the last time you went to a meeting that you didn't know anybody at? Go there. That's where you need to be. Think about who is at the table and decide whether, if it's your staff, they actually need to be senior, or can you have the conversation with junior staff? Ask whether those voices at the table actually are symbolic and reflective of what you are trying to do, and be comfortable with the challenge that comes back at you that you're not doing enough. Create the teams and demand the teams to step up and challenge themselves. What is political today will not be political tomorrow, and what is not political today will absolutely be political tomorrow. Advocate, advocate, advocate. And I know we heard earlier today we have to be really careful. Don't be too careful. It's okay to get in trouble just once and apologize later. But if we do not step up and become political, become active, become advocates. It's okay. They're not all going to act up. And become active, we actually will not be able to do the work we need to do. Policy is essential to everything we do. Break it and then glue it back together. Don't worry about not breaking it. Break it and glue it back together. Because this times, we play by rules. These times are asking us not to play by the rules. And for all of us who have played so nicely by the rules, we're realizing that we will not be able to get the work done that we need to do, nor will we be able to support the organizations and the institutions that we want to support if we continue to play by the rules. So, loosen your belt, don't play by the rules, challenge what's at the table, show up someplace you've never been, ask what you can do, make sure you do it twice, break the plate, and glue it back together again. That's how we're going to get through these turbulent times. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, and now I'll invite Jack Krauskopf up to the panel. Our BBBers will be walking around asking for your questions. And Jack, I think you have a few of your own, yes?
I have one to start with.
Okay.
Having listened this morning and being probably a pretty good symbol of the older generation, one of those five that was talked about earlier, Dina, maybe it's the passing generation. I would be interested in your take on how all this applies to government. Is government still as important as those of us that have been involved in trying to staff it, change it, make it manage better as it has been? And if so, what needs to be done? Given your disruptive advice, what should we be doing?
Yeah, I spent 8 years working in state government. I absolutely love state government. I think there's no higher service other than serving in the military as civil service. I think we have to rely on government. But government is an institution that is based in systems and patriarchy that needs to be readjusted. And the reason that I say that is because in all reality, we are looking at an institution that is based on seniority. And we heard from a young woman today that said, you know, our voices aren't in the room. We know that there are more women running for political office than ever before. Those voices are hardly ever sitting at tables. And if they're just getting elected today, then we will not see them for 10, 15 years in places of leadership. So I believe in government. I think we need to challenge government. I think we need more voices in government. And I think that we need to propose solutions to how government works and have the real conversation about what we want government to do for us. It is for the people, by the people, of the people, and it has become a more elitist location. And so we need to actually figure out how and where our voices can be heard, how we are going to engage government, and recognize that it is on every single level of the work that we are doing. So as most of you know, it's, you know, as basic as holding accountable your school board or your city council person, as well as holding forward what's happening in New York and what's in Albany and what's happening in Washington, D.C. And so when I hear conversations around changes in tax laws and making sure that we need to be advocating effectively our work to our elected officials, I think we should be doing it consistently. And at the Ms. Foundation, we actually have a policy and advocacy component to our work and require our grantees to do something that has to do with policy advocacy as they move forward. It's not just about providing the services, it's about making sure that we are making the world better.
Following from that, how do you break the rules when the politicians are in bed with, I think it says, the social injustice?
Social injustice.
Thank you.
Yeah. So first off, I will just say that I don't necessarily believe that a two-party system and structure is the way that it should be, and so we need to actually break out of what we have in front of us. We need to be creative about the alternative structures that we want to put into place, and reinvent what that looks like. So, we can, in other countries and around the world, we see learnings that take place and structures that take place and engagement from institutions. In other countries, those institutions hold a position that allows them to support activity and action. And I believe in the voice of the people. I believe that you need to ensure that the voice of the people, and if you do not like who's in leadership, you can change it. You can change it. And that happens in institutions and it happens in government. So, there's an accountability within institutions about who's on the board. And we today have these things right here. They're amazing for whistleblowers and how we're going to tell stories. And changing the narrative can happen in a multitude of ways. You can tweet about it, you can text about it, you can Facebook it, you can Snapchat it, it's all out there. And as leaders, we actually need to be in that game, playing it on the internet, through Twitter, in those spaces, and getting our voices out there.
There was a book titled Women's Way of Knowing. What are women's ways of leading?
Well, I am a big believer that women are not monolithic. And so, when we say this, there have been a number of studies or a number of conversations where it's, women lead with their heart. They tend to be better listeners. That, really? What it is that our lived experiences are different. Our sensitivities are different because of our lived experiences. And so what we bring to the table are those kinds of lived experiences. And it shouldn't just be all women at the table. What it needs to be is a diversity of voices, of experiences that come to the table. And that's what I'm talking about. When I say trust women, maybe we need to reassess whether a capitalist model for measuring success in nonprofits is the right way to measure success in nonprofits. And so that's something we just need to consider, and it's a way we need to look at what's going on. So I have a hard time when people are like, well, women this. Well, guess what? I am a black woman who grew up in Minot, North Dakota. The experiences of a black woman who grew up in New York City are completely different than mine, and yet there are similarities, right? So, let's not just be monolithic and make assumptions about how we lead. Women have been taught to lead by those that have been put in front of us, and if those examples are diversified, then you come with diversified leadership experiences. If they're not, and you have to play in a field that's all male-dominated, then that's where you play.
I didn't write this one. How do you involve the next generation of men in the work of disruption? Leaving them out entirely isn't a solution to the patriarchy.
No, it's not. From the get-go, I have always thought that men had a place at the table. This is about gender equity. This is not about exclusion. And so we have continuously invited men to the table. As I said, our board has men on it. My staff has men on it. We support men who are leading organizations, not holistically, but in a number of ways. And we have a young professionals group that has men on it. It is about engaging in a conversation, and these are times that are very different than other times in history. We have minimally two generations of men, just like women, who have been around since Title IX and Roe v. Wade and have had full access to education. They are expecting or have an understanding that their mothers, sisters, wives, partners may be in the workforce and may choose to be in the workforce and may actually be out earning them. And that means that they are engaged in a conversation very differently than other people. And we need to invite them in. I think sometimes when I was my first year at the Ms. Foundation, I did a national listening tour where I traveled around the country and listened. And I heard from men that said, you don't want us in the room, so you don't feel safe with us in the room, so we're not going to be there. What we've said is, you need to come into the room, you need to sit silently so that you can learn to listen, And then you can start to be part of an engagement process. And I think it's just being about openness and honesty, but we are constantly inviting men into the conversation.
How do you train your disruptors? What competencies?
Ooh, good one. So we at the Ms. Foundation are actually funders of the disruptors. So we're not the trainers of this disruptors, but for us, it is about speaking truth to power. It is about the ability to organize. It is about one's ability to speak confidently and to come up with creative solutions. It is about having the stamina to do what you need to do. It is about being able to raise the dollars, and it is about generating accountability. Those are some of the things that we look for. We look for diversity of boards, diversity of staff. We also at the foundation recognize that there may be some different ways of processing what that needs to look like. So it's not about how well you write necessarily, but how well you communicate. So rather than filling out a form, you may be able to submit information electronically through a video. That may be a way of approaching that in a slightly different way. And there's some additional kind of key pieces we can do. So some of that work is about building social movement, supporting social movement building, and trusting that those that come to us with proposals have thought through what they're doing and asking key and critical questions.
I don't think in all the terrific discussion that we've heard in the panels and your talk this morning, this question has been asked, but it certainly ought to be on our minds. How is the Ms. Foundation fighting gun violence? How can women make this happen?
Yeah. So gun violence, we are doing it through one of our platforms, which is through safety. Safety is one of our key areas, and so we are supporting grassroots organizations led by women, particularly women of color, who are interested in raising and combating gun violence and supporting their efforts to change and advocate for policy within their communities. So it is not us that are doing it, but it is them who are doing it, and we are providing the supports for them to do it through supporting their general operating activities. And so, one of the things that I have said is in this conversation that's going on right now is one of our requirements is how do we think differently about it? Women of color have been talking about gun violence for years, and we are seeing very little traction. One of the local vocal voices around what's been happening most recently is a young woman of color, and how are we listening to them? How are we promoting them? What does that need to look like? Where are they testifying? Are all key parts of what we do. And so the work that we're doing is through our safety portfolio and supporting those new young organizers who are coming up and showing up at the table.
Just a follow-up question on that, and going back to the government question at the beginning, we've got elections coming up for our national Senate and House of Representatives. What role should people in this room be playing? What difference can that make in questions like gun violence, or are we stuck in where we are right now? That kind of question.
So I think the people in this room need to be writing the questions for politicians, and then holding them accountable, asking, being a source of education so that they can share information to their constituents themselves in moving that through. Individually, people can do whatever they'd like to do. Institutionally, you need to just make sure that you're being as effective as possible. I believe everybody has two roles to play, both that through their institution and that through them individually. And I believe that everybody is an organizer. So whether you are organizing your family, your church, your neighborhood, your best friends, your book club, I don't care what you're organizing, you should be organizing, and you should be asking one question. And you should be ensuring that everybody participates in our democratic process. And if they are not registered to vote, get them registered to vote if they can, and make sure they get to the polls.
What skills do women need to develop to become effective disruptors and leaders?
The skills that people need to be effective disruptors and leaders are...
Or are you born a disruptor?
I don't. I probably was born a disruptor, if you ask my mother. I do believe that anybody can be a disruptor. I believe that there will be something that happens, and disruption can happen on any level. So, you don't have to be a disruptor in the public discourse. You can be the disruptor in your own household that challenges how people are thinking through things. I oftentimes say the work that we need to do is oftentimes closer to the ground than it is to the ceiling. So we need to do things that are close to us. And what we need to do is know our facts, educate ourselves, ask the question even if you're not sure it should be asked, hold people accountable, including yourself, into whether you are doing what you are being asked to do and what you are asking others to do, and be willing to push back and make yourself a little uncomfortable in order to make others uncomfortable. Be forgiving, be patient, and be willing to try new things. And I say be forgiving because sometimes we come in and just make assumptions that people don't understand, and we have to be willing to hear them out and then help move them along. It's an investment in time, an investment in patience that sometimes gets conflated about what we need to do.
Can we ask for further questions from the floor? I have one last question, but I wanted to hold that.
I think we've gotten our questions from the floor. Why don't you ask yours?
It's not mine. It's the one from the floor that I was saving for last. Will you be our president?
No, thank you.
I want to thank you for this extra conversation and for your keynote. One of the things that strikes me throughout the entire morning, I think we all came in, we were all a little uncomfortable. I think through the conversations that we've had and that we've heard this morning, there's that sense of amplifying what it is that we're uncomfortable about, and to say to all of us that it's okay to advocate. Again, in the world of Chief Sheehan, we want to make sure that we understand what the world is in which we're operating. BBB, our mission is to advance, or I'll say advocate for marketplace trust. So as disruption takes place, I think to have it be successful, and this is just me talking now because it's my own observation, for disruption to have a positive outcome, people have to trust that what is going on is authentic, that it is credible, that it has all the things that you see up here under BBB. That's why we do this program. Because disruption, even though it sounds like, right when you hear disruption, it sounds like, it's almost like a negative. It doesn't have to be. It just means that it's going to change something. Something is changing, somebody is questioning something. But I would say, for all of us, as we advocate for whatever it is that you believe needs to be advocated for, is to do it with credibility, to do it with authenticity, and to do it with trust in mind. Because without that, what do we have? We have the Edelman Trust Barometer going down even more. We are the group that's the most trusted. I think we need to, I don't like the word leverage, so I'll think of something else, but we need to use that in all of the work that we do. So with that, I'll get off my virtual soapbox, and I'll just say thank you so much, and thank you to all of our panelists today. Thank you to American Express. Thank you to the New York Community Trust. Thank you to JMT Consulting Group, all of our event supporters. There's information back there for you to look at. I want you to save the date, February 26, 2019, for our next event, hopefully here. And March 27th, Raising Your Budgeting Game, making the most of your key management tools. I don't know if Candace Meth is still here. Yes? Eisner Amper, and her partner's going to do that program. And April 24th, Designing Internal Controls by Eisner Amper. Again, I want to thank our keynote speaker, Teresa Younger, Jack Krauskopf, and everybody else today. And the program is now concluded. Thank you.